Okay, so the lecture today is about support vector machines. But before we start, I want to introduce a few concepts from convex optimization, in particular duality. Why? Because duality is important in the context of support vector machines. It gives, first, is useful from an optimization point of view, but it is also useful in terms of interpretation. So what is duality? So I will give you a few recipes to build what is called the dual problem given a primal optimization problem. But what you first need to know about duality is that it consists, given an optimization problem consisting of minimizing an objective function f, it consists of devising a concave optimization problem q that you want to maximize. So here the notation, by the way, will be slightly different than in the rest of the lectures, meaning that f will not be a model, x will not be a data point. Here we are choosing notation from optimization, meaning f is the objective function, it's the function we want to minimize, and x represents some parameters that you want to optimize. Okay. So here, in this particular example, f is a convex function that we want to minimize, and we are going to build a dual problem, which is the maximization of a concave function q with respect to other variables nu. And there will be optimal primal variables x star, and there will be also optimal dual parameters nu star. So in some cases, there is what we call strong duality, which means that there is a very strong relation between the primal optimization problem and the dual maximization problem, in the sense that the minimum of f will be equal to the maximum of q. Even so, the set of parameters x and u are different. So it turns out that for most convex optimization problems that are reasonable, so it simply means that any convex optimization problem you are going to see in this class, there is this phenomenon of strong duality. And I'm going to give you a few details later. So that's it. Duality is nothing else than changing a problem and obtaining and building a different one. Now, why is it useful to build a different optimization problem from a primal optimization problem? So it is useful because sometimes when there is strong duality, it gives you some intuition. Then it is also useful because sometimes you know the relation between nu star and x star, such that if you solve the dual problem, you are able to recover the solution of the primal problem. So of course, this may be useless if the dual problem is complicated or difficult to optimize, but sometimes the dual problem is much simpler. Sometimes the dimension of the dual problem is smaller than the dimension of the primal problem. This is this sort of phenomenon that will be useful for support vector machines. So of course, it turns out the relation between x star and nu star is not always known. This is the case in some cases. This will be the case for support vector machines. And before we go into the technical details, the last thing I want to say about duality is that it also allows you, and this is extremely useful both in theory and in practice, it allows you to automatically control how far you are from the optimal solution. For example, if you have an iterate x tilde, which is different from x star, it is possible to upper bound the quantity f of x tilde minus f of x star if you know a dual variable nu tilde. Why? Simply because if you have strong duality, this quantity here that we call a duality gap, which is f of x tilde minus q of nu tilde, is an upper bound on this optimality gap. And if you build things in a particular way, there are techniques that, given some x tilde, that automatically give you some nu tilde, such that when you get close to the optimum, this quantity converges to zero. So now there are several ways of building dual problems. in these classes, we are going to deal with the techniques called Lagrangian duality. So I know that some of you may have seen that either because you have taken optimization classes or because you have seen Lagrangian problems in other contexts, because these are things that are pretty common in economics, for example. So let us go into the details. So it will look like a bit like a recipe, but we'll still try to get a bit of intuition about what is going on. So consider a generic convex optimization problem of this form. You have a variable x that you want to optimize over some set big X. You want to minimize f of x, and you have a set of constraints that correspond to constraints that need to be satisfied for a specific problem. So we are going to consider a set of equality constraints. So in some cases, the number of equality constraints can also be 0 if there are no such constraints, but in general case, we consider there are some constraints like this. And we also have some inequality constraints, G, J, for R inequality constraints. So far here in this slide, we are not making any assumptions about F, G, and H. We are going to make some assumptions later, convex assumptions, for example, but here there is no such assumption. Still, we assume that the minimum of F is achieved at a specific point, X star, which is a global minimum. And we are going to call F star this the optimal value of the objective function. For any set of objective function and constraints, we call the Lagrangian of the problem is a function of the primal variable x and of other variables that we call the dual variables, lambda and mu, that were corresponding to the variable nu in the introductory slide. So lambda and mu are a set of scalar values, one scalar per constraint, one lambda for each equality constraint, and one parameter mu for each inequality constraint. And the Lagrangian is simply the sum, the weighted sum of the constraints plus the primal objective. Now, how do we build this dual function? We build this dual function by minimizing the Lagrangian with respect to the primal variable. So this is the recipe. Lagrangian that you define, you minimize with respect to x. It gives you a function of the dual variable that we call the Lagrange dual function. Next, we will see what are the properties of this dual function, why it is related to this relation that we were discussing in the introduction about the primal objective function and the dual objective function that will be concave. Okay, so here is simply a definition of the dual objective, which is the minimization of the Lagrangian with respect to x. Now, we are going to use notations that are a bit more compact because I don't like to manipulate these sums. So I will write the primal problem as simply minimization of f of x such that h of x is equal to 0, g of x is smaller than 0. And you see, you just have to put all of the constraints as the entries of some vectors. And with an abuse of notation, this simply means that every entry of the vector is non-positive. And now so before we have a definition of a dual objective function, which is the minimization of a Lagrangian with respect to x. And here is now what we call the dual problem. The dual problem is the maximization of the Lagrange of the dual function q under the constraints that mu is non-negative. So what is mu? Mu corresponds to the dual variables associated to the inequalities, inequality constraints. So for these ones, there is a constraint here that this dual variable should be non-negative. So what are the properties of this dual problem? The first one is that Q is concave in the dual variables, even if the original problem is not convex. So this may be strange, but I will simply, there is a very simple argument to explain that I'm going to discuss in the next slide. But you immediately see that there is something interesting about it, is that given any optimization problem, I have here a concave optimization problem, meaning the dual, I should be able to solve it if the dimension is not too large, for example. Then the dual function gives also a lower bound on the optimal value f star when mu is non-negative, meaning as soon as mu here is non-negative, the dual variable mu, you have that for any pair of dual variable lambda and mu, Q of lambda mu is smaller than f star, where f star is the minimum of f under these constraints here. So that's also interesting because it already shows a relation between the primal optimization problem and the dual optimization problem. In particular, if we maximize this quantity, we still get a lower bound. And we call that weak duality. But before that, let us simply look at a basic argument to say that the dual objective is a concave function. So remember that the Lagrangian is defined as a weighted sum of the primal objective plus the sum of the constraints. And we simply note that this is a linear function in the dual variable. And it turns out that there is a classical result, which you can find in classical textbook in optimization. I can also put a reference on the web page. That if you take the point that the pointwise minimum of concave functions is also concave. So pointwise minimum means you minimize with respect to x. And what are the concave functions? They are these come from the linearity of the Lagrangian with respect to the dual variable, because a linear function is both concave and convex. Therefore, the dual variable is concave. So what you can do is, if you are not convinced, that's also something we can do during the interactive session. We can also give example. We can plot a set of concave functions. You take the minimum of them, and you will see that naturally you get also a concave function. So here, when I say a collection, it will mean an infinite collection because we are minimizing over x. But the intuition is correct. And the proof is not very complicated, by the way. Now, assuming that we all agree with this fact, it is also easy to show, I'm jumping to the last line, that if you take dual variables such that mu is non-negative, if you take x bar to be any feasible point, that is a feasible point is a point such that the equality and inequality constraints are satisfied, then Q of lambda mu is smaller than f of x bar for all x bar. And in particular, it will also be smaller than f star, which is the minimum of f under the constraints. So why is that? And here you will see why we have chosen mu, which is a non-negative quantity. If you consider the part of a Lagrangian, which is the weighted sum of the constraints, the first term here is equal to 0 because hi of x bar is equal to 0. The second one is also non-positive because mu is non-negative and gi of x bar is non-positive. And this is the reason why there is a constraint on mu I to be non-negative, because we want this quantity here to be also non-positive. So that leaves us to the Lagrangian here, L of x bar lambda mu, which is equal to the primal objective, f of x bar, plus this quantity, which is smaller or equal than 0. So this is, in particular, smaller than f of x bar. So we have that then the Lagrangian, when x bar is a primal point, is smaller than f of x bar, meaning that if you minimize the Lagrangian with respect to x over the set of, if you minimize, the Lagrangian with respect to x, then naturally you get a quantity which is smaller than that, and you get that Q of lambda mu is smaller than f of x bar. So this is why the dual function is always something which is smaller than the primal objective. So this gives us the weak duality principle, which is that since the dual function is always smaller than f star, if you maximize the dual function, you still get a lower bound on f star. So if you call q star the optimal value of the Lagrange dual problem, you get the weak duality inequality, which is that q star is smaller than f star. And there are also a few details when f star and q star are actually at infinity, but let us forget about that. The difference between q star and f star is called the optimality duality gap of the problem. So this is the difference between the best you can do in primal objective and the best you can do in dual objective. And what is really interesting is that in many cases, in particular for most reasonable convex optimization problems, you have what is called strong duality. Which is that, in fact, this inequality is an equality. And this is really important because this is through this sort of relations that we are going to get interesting relations between the primal and dual variables. So if strong duality holds, the best lower bound that can be obtained from the Lagrange dual function is tight. We have that the maximum of the dual is exactly the minimum of the primal. So strong duality, it's something that does not hold in general, but it usually holds for convex problems. And more precisely, the conditions for convex problems are called constraint qualifications. And there are a few technical details, but since this is not a class, on optimization, we are going to leave this aspect aside. Basically, for all of the convex optimization problems we are going to consider, there will be strong duality, and these qualification constraints are really mild, in fact. So in such a case, what do we have? We have that for all feasible primal and dual points, x, lambda, and mu. So feasible dual points simply means that mu is non-negative. We have that q of lambda mu is smaller than the maximum of the dual Lagrange function, which is equal to f of x star, which is smaller than f of x. And these are interesting relations. So here is a slide about example of constraint qualification that ensure strong duality, but I will skip that. Like I told you, there are a few remarks. There are many cases where we have these relations. Now, if we come back to this question of relations between x star and lambda and mu star, suppose that strong duality holds, and consider the optimal primal variable x star, the optimal dual variables lambda star and mu star. Then what we have that f of x star is equal to q of lambda star mu star. And if we write the definition of all of this, which is here the minimization over x of the Lagrangian function, we know that this, we have done that already. In fact, this is smaller in particular than f of x star plus this quantity evaluated at x star. And because x star is a feasible point, this is non-negative, and this is smaller than f of x star. So basically, all of these inequalities are in fact equalities. And there is also something about what is called complementary slackness. In fact, I don't really want, it's something which is good to know. So if you want to know more about this, feel free to spend time on this slide, but it's actually not something I'm going to need for the rest of the presentation of support vector machines. It was useful in the previous versions, but in fact, I just got rid of it. I just simplified the presentation of SVMs to get rid of this concept. But this is simply a concept that tells us that for the inequality constraints, you always have either the inequality constraint, which is tight, meaning j of x star is equal to 0, or you have the inequality which is not tight, and the corresponding dual variable has to be equal to 0. This is a consequence of the previous slide. But I mean, you don't have really to remember this precisely. You will see that we don't really need it to study the SVM. And here comes the main part. And so, by the way, if you want to know more about convex optimization, really feel free to ask me about references. I will be happy to give you some pointers. So that was a very, very short introduction on duality, because that will be a key to study support vector machines. So support vector machines is the first kernel method for pattern recognition, which is still very popular because they are efficient solvers. When you don't have a huge amount of data, it's very easy to use. And there are many, if you don't have structured data such as images, or text or speech, it's often state-of-the-art in many contexts. So it corresponds to a large margin classifier with a specific choice of loss function, which is the hinge loss. And the hinge loss leads to a phenomenon, which is that it will sparsify the solution. And I will tell you what is meant by this statement later. It will become clear, so I will not spend too much time here. The fact that we use the hinge loss will also give you access to dedicated optimization methods that are useful because of the hinge loss. So you see the effect of choosing a loss function can have several effects. It can have an effect on the solution here. Even so, in terms of quality of prediction, very often the hinge loss is very similar, to the squared hinge loss or logistic regression loss, but it also can give you some access to fast algorithms. So what is the hinge loss? The hinge loss, remember that this is simply, given some margin u, it's simply the max of 1 minus u and 0. So it's a piecewise linear function. I should say piecewise affine function that here for y equal to 1 has this shape. You see, it's simply something which is a linear function as soon as the margin is smaller than 1. So you pay a price that grows linearly. And if the margin is greater than 1, you don't pay any price. It's exactly equal to 0. And the SVM is the large margin classifier with the hinge loss, which is defined here, that we can use with any positive definite kernel as soon as you use RKHS for the space of function here and the RKHS norm here. So problem reformulation by the representer theorem. So you should start to get used to this technique. We get an optimization problem in infinite dimension. We use the representer theorem that tells us that the solution lives in a finite dimensional subspace such that f hat is parameterized by a sum of alpha I k of xix. And then we look for the alpha I such that we can know the parameters of your prediction function. So alpha hat solves this optimization problem. So now you should be used to the notations, and that would be simple for you to see what is the relation between this and the formulation on the previous slide. So this is a convex optimization problem, which is non-smooth. Non-smooth because the hinge loss is non-smooth. So that means that you could use still gradient-based methods for non-smooth optimization that should work. But it turns out that we can also work a bit more on this formulation and turn it into the minimization of a quadratic function under linear constraints. It turns out that this is called a quadratic program in the optimization literature, and there are many techniques and many solvers to solve them, such that if you have a quadratic program solver, it's actually very easy to use an SVM because you simply have to enter what quadratic function we are talking about, plus what are the linear constraints. So how do we change this non-smooth problem into a smooth optimization problem with linear constraints? This is not obvious, but what we do for that is to introduce new variables. It's also a classical trick in optimization to reformulate objective functions to introduce additional variables. So here, it's easy to see that the previous formulation is equivalent to the following one, which is the same objective as before, except that the hinge loss is replaced by this variable xi I, and we have the constraints that xi I has to be greater than the hinge loss. So of course, since there are no constraints on xi except this one, at the optimum, xi I will be exactly equal to the hinge loss, such that naturally there is an equivalence between this formulation in dimension 2n and the previous one, which was in dimension n. So we go from n dimensions to 2n, so we lose something here, but what we gain is that we have a quadratic objective here, which is linear in psi, quadratic in alpha, and it turns out that this inequality, psi I being greater than the hinge loss, because the hinge loss is the max of 0 and 1 minus the margin, we can simply reformulate it as two constraints. Because of this relation, u is greater than the hinge of v is equivalent to saying that u is greater than 1 minus v, and u is greater than 0, because this is equivalent to saying that u is greater than the max of these two quantities. So here we are. Now, since this is linear in alpha, we have an optimization problem, which is the minimization of a quadratic function under linear constraints. So in summary, what is often called the primal formulation of the SVM is actually the following one, where we have parameterized the solutions with alpha, and we have this quadratic function to minimize under this set of linear constraints. So this is simply a reformulation of what I just said in the previous slide. So this is a classical QP program, a QP, which means quadratic program, and there are optimization packages to do that. What may be a bit problematic is the number of constraints, because we have 2n constraints, and the dimension is 2n in terms of variables. But this, you can also, it still means that you can use quadratic program solvers to solve the primal SVM formulation. Now, it turns also out that this dual problem, the dual problem of the primal SVM formulation, is much simpler to use. So this is a nice illustration of duality that can be used for optimization purposes. And besides, we will also have a relation between the optimal dual solution and the primal solution. And very often, the SVM formulation is presented only with the dual formulation. So maybe you have seen already the dual formulation, but maybe not the primal. So here what we are going to see is how to go from the primal formulation to the dual formulation. So what we are going to do is that we are going to use the Lagrangian recipe. Here we do not even have to think about the interpretation. We can just apply the recipe. We define the Lagrangian of the problem. So we have two primal variables, alpha and psi. We have some inequality constraints. So I'm going to introduce, for this 2n inequality constraints, I'm going to introduce 2n variables, mu, which is a vector in Rn, and u, which is a vector in Rn as well. And if I define the Lagrangian as in the introduction about convex optimization, this is what I get. I get a part where here I recognize the primal objective, and here I have the weighted sum of the inequality constraints. If I use matrix notations, because I like to use matrix notations and put the psi I into a single vector psi, I can simply rewrite everything like this. This part here is psi times a vector that contains only 1 divided by n. This is nothing else than this part. Similarly, here mu transpose 1 is simply the sum of the mu I times 1 here. The nu I transpose psi is simply the sum of the nu I psi I. Similarly, mu times psi is the sum of the mu I psi I. And here, this ugly term here, this is this sum of the mu I yi k alpha I. And here we introduce a diagonal matrix that contains the yi on the diagonal. But the notation is more compact. We don't have the sum, so it's nicer to look at it. So now a second step of the recipe, you minimize the Lagrangian with respect to the primal variable. So let us first do that with respect to alpha. Okay, given some psi, mu, and nu, we take the gradient. It's a quadratic function. So it gives us a linear system. And since we are lucky, this linear system is very easy to solve. Actually, there is no need for an iterative algorithm. When you take the gradient, there is a matrix k here. So it's k times this quantity. This is a vector. So we just have to say, I want alpha to be equal to this vector here divided by 2 times lambda. And this gives me the optimal primal variable alpha star given a dual variable mu. And remember, this is nice because here we have a relation. This will also hold for the optimal solution, primal and dual solution. So we have the relation between the primal variable alpha and the dual variable mu. So it's a nice thing. Now, something which is which may look a bit strange the first time you do this is that if you look at the parts that depend on psi, it's a linear function. Now, a question for you is, what is the minimum of a linear function when there are no constraints? There are two cases. Either you go to minus infinity if this linear function is not constant, or this is a function which is exactly equal to 0. So it is basically minimized for any psi. So this may, I admit, it may look a bit strange to consider functions that goes to minus infinity, but it is also something very classical. It will tell us that if the part that depends on psi is not a constant function equal to 0, then the dual objective is going to go to minus infinity. So it's a bad value if you want to maximize it. So that means that the only set of dual variables that are of interest for us that will allow you to maximize the dual function will be the one that correspond to having a constant linear function. So that means that you look at the gradient of the Lagrangian with respect to psi, and you obtain a relation with respect to the dual variable. And you simply say, I want the function to be constant, so I want the gradient to be equal to 0. It gives you a relation between mu and nu that has to be satisfied if at some point you want to maximize the dual objective. So the relation here is that mu plus nu has to be equal to 1 over n. 1 over n being the vector that contains only once divided by n. If we plug all of this into the definition of the Lagrangian that was in the previous slide, and don't hesitate to take some time at home, and write this on a sheet of paper to check that everything is correct. What we have is that Q of mu nu, where mu and nu are two dual variables, the function being obtained by minimizing the Lagrangian with respect to psi and alpha. First, we have seen that it is equal to minus infinity if mu plus nu is different than 1 over n. And if it is equal to 1 over n, then we can simply plug the optimal alpha star that we have obtained in the definition of the Lagrangian, and you get this quantity. So let us maybe come back to the definition of the Lagrangian, which was here on the bottom. What we have done is that we had a condition, we have found a condition such that the part that depend on psi is equal to 0. These are constraints on dual variables. We have minimized the quadratic part with respect to alpha with a closed form solutions for alpha. And when we do that, we obtain this quadratic concave function with respect to mu. So then the dual problem is maximizing this dual objective here such that mu and nu are non-negative because they correspond to inequality constraints, and mu plus nu is equal to 1 over n. Okay, so this is the maximization of a quadratic function under a set of linear constraints. So it is a concave optimization problem. Now, we are not there yet. This is typically not what we call the dual of the SVM. What we call the dual of the SVM is obtained after a few simplifications. So what are these simplifications? This simplification is simply exploiting the fact that, well, mu plus nu are constraints such that mu I plus nu I is equal to 1 over n. So that means that we don't need, to optimize over two n variables. We simply have to optimize over mu, And each time we have a new I appearing in the objective or in the constraint, we replace it by 1 over n minus mu I. So then we have several cases. If there is a mu I which is strictly greater than 1 over n, there is no way you are going to find a new I such that this inequality holds. That means that the dual objective is equal to minus infinity in that case. On the other hand, if mu I is between 0 and 1 over n, simply you choose mu I to be equal to 1 over n minus mu I, and you're fine. So all of this means that our previous dual problem here, which has this set of constraints, mu non-negative, nu non-negative, these equality constraints, and this quadratic objective, is in fact equivalent to a dual objective which has a single dual variable, which is mu. And mu has what is called a box constraint, meaning it's a linear constraint, which is very simple. Mu should be non-negative and smaller than 1 over n. And the rest is the same. This is the concave quadratic function that we want to maximize. You can also, if you don't like the matrix notation, you can write it with some sums. This also works. So we are getting very close to the classical definition of the dual of the SVM. Now, what we often call the dual of the SVM, there is a last step, which is to use the relation between mu and alpha. Remember that we had derived this relation. Alpha is the primal variable. And we know that the relation between the optimal primal variable and the optimal dual variable is that alpha is equal to the diagonal of y times mu divided by 2 lambda. And because this link is so simple, we can simply make a change of variable in the previous slide and define an optimization problem with respect to alpha, which is equivalent to the previous one. So if we do that, you will obtain what we call the dual formulation of the SVM. So you take the previous optimization problem with respect to mu, you make a change of variable, you optimize with respect to alpha, and what you get is that the optimization problem that you get is the maximization of this now very simple quadratic function, which is concave because of the minus sign here. So it's simply 2 times alpha times y minus alpha transpose times k times alpha. And the constraints are relatively simple. For every I, we need that yi alpha I has to be in a box, in some closed interval. And this is what is called the dual formulation. Let us skip that. Let us skip that as well. And let us try to get now more intuition about what this means. We know this 1 over 2 lambda n, I will simply call it C. And by the way, when you use some toolbox such as libsvm or even scikit-learn, you have to choose the parameter C. This is exactly this quantity here. That this is the parameter that depends on the regularization parameter lambda. And in the toolbox, you have to choose C. C will be the regularization parameter. When C is small, it will mean a large regularization. When C is large, you have less constraints. So it will mean a small regularization. So the dual is now the maximization indeed of this quadratic function under these box constraints. And if we want to get some geometric interpretation, what we can do is to look at the gradient of Q. So the gradient of Q turns out that in that case is simply k times alpha minus y. Okay. And by the way, I also, without changing the solution, I also divided the objective by 2. That was here, there was a factor 2. So if you're asking yourself where these two disappeared, I just divided by 2 because it doesn't change the solution. Simply because it gives me a simple form of the gradient, which is k alpha minus y. And now remember that what is k alpha? K alpha is the vector that carries the entries f of xi, where xi correspond to the training data. Remember, this is the step we did when we kernelized the support vector machine formulation. So it means that the gradient can be interpreted as some residual of f of xi minus yi. Now let us consider a first case where for some index I, we have a label which is +1. And in fact, we can do something very similar with -1, but let us consider yi equal to 1. If we consider the solution, there are three possible cases. Okay, we have this with respect to alpha I, the objective is here the minimization of, okay, I changed two things that I forgot to say. I changed here the maximization with respect to alpha. I put a minus sign as well, and I'm considering now the minimization with respect to alpha. Sorry, I forgot to mention that, such that this is indeed the dual of the SVM, because maximizing a concave function is the same as minimizing minus this concave function. Okay, so there is no mystery here. Now let us come back to our case of interest, which is that with this small reformulation, the gradient can be interpreted as something very simple, f of xi minus yi. And this quadratic function with respect to alpha I can plot it as a quadratic function like this. If I do a slice, of the objective and I'm optimizing over alpha I only, this is a typical quadratic function, which is minimum at some point, alpha I star. And there are two cases. One case is that yi alpha I star is strictly between 0 and c. That means that these constraints are not tight, which is good. But it means that in that case, the optimality condition is that the gradient here has to be 0. I have to be at a part of the objective where this is flat. So that means that what does it mean to have the gradient? The partial derivative with respect to alpha I to be equal to 0. It means f of xi is equal to yi. I can also say that this is also implied by yi times f of xi equal to 1. And if you do the same reasoning with yi equal to -1, you obtain the same condition. So that's interesting because it tells us that when I look at these coefficients alpha, if yi alpha I star is strictly between 0 and c, then necessarily I have the margin to be exactly equal to 1. Keep that in mind because you will see next when you give more visual examples what it means. When the constraint is not exactly satisfied, the margin has to be exactly 1. What is the case 2? The case 2 is, well, this constraint here will hit one of the corner, okay, of the box. Let us look at the case where yi alpha I star is equal to c. So this is again what happens. We have a quadratic function that we want to minimize, but we have the constraint that the solution has to lie in this interval. And since it is hitting the right part of the interval here, it means that it has necessarily to be at a place where the objective Q is non-increasing. So it means that the partial derivative of Q with respect to I has to be non-positive. And because of the relation between the gradient and this residual, if we do the same reasoning with the other case where yi is equal to -1, we obtain the condition yi f of xi, meaning the margin is smaller than 1. Okay, so to recap, the first case is the solution is strictly for a specific I between the interval, then the margin is equal to 1. But if it hits the right part of this interval, the margin has to be smaller than 1. And the last case, of course, is where we are in a case where the solution alpha I will hit the left part of the interval. So this is typically what it does. This is a typical quadratic function. We want to minimize it, so we would like to go there, but we cannot because of the constraint. So we are hitting the left part of the interval, alpha I is equal to 0. And necessarily, it has to be at a part where the objective function is in fact increasing. So the partial derivative has to be non-negative. And the final relation is simply that the margin has to be greater than 1. So this, everything is true if you simply change a few signs, if you consider the case where yi is equal to -1. But why this is interesting to do that? Because it gives us this geometric interpretation. Consider now, and this is one of the important messages of the lecture, consider a binary classification problem. Here it's not separable, but that's okay. The SVM does not have to deal with linearly separable data. We learn our hyperplane that separates the data. So here the points are already in the RKHS, so which means that the decision function is linear. We plot the level set of f equal to 0. This is basically the hyperplane that we use for classification. And we look at the case where the margin is exactly equal to 1, meaning if +1 is associated to the white dots and -1 is associated to the black dots, it will correspond to the points that fall onto these lines. These are level sets. So now what is the interpretation? Remember that for the when we use the formulation in terms of alpha, we have one alpha I per data point, no per xi. So that means that we can do some interpretation and associate each entry of the alpha I to a specific data point. And what we have seen before, and this is the important part, is that when we have some alpha times y that are strictly between 0 and c being 1/2 n lambda, then necessarily these points have a margin exactly equal to 1. They correspond to the points, the 2 black points here and the 2 white points here. Now we also have points that are hitting one side of the interval, meaning alpha y is equal to c. These correspond to points where the margin is smaller, where the margin is indeed is smaller than 1. For example, here this one is misclassified, meaning the margin is negative. Here we have this white dots is well classified, but the margin is between 0 and 1. This white dot here is misclassified, meaning that the margin is also smaller than 1. It's even here smaller than -1. And then we have the easy points. What are the easy points? They are the points that admit a margin which is strictly greater than 1. And for these points, we have the condition that alpha has to be equal to 0 from what we said before. For example, these 3 points, as well as this one, necessarily have an alpha coefficient equal to 0 because they are points that are very easy to classify. They are classified with very high confidence, which means the margin is large. Similarly, on this side, we have these white dots that have a margin which is strictly greater than 1. They should be seen as points that are easy to classify. And so now you will see why we did all of that. It was not simply to discuss the value of these coefficients. What is important to see is that the points that are easy to classify lead to coefficients alpha I that are exactly equal to 0. That means that in your prediction function, they do not contribute to the solution. In some sense, it means that the solution in terms of alpha is sparse because it will automatically discard the points that are very easy. So this is, I think, is an important message because it means that the points that contribute to your model are the ones that are difficult to classify or that may also be misclassified by the model. And this is what we call support vectors. The support vectors correspond to the training points which have non-zero coefficients alpha I, which are points that are important for the classification, that contribute to the solution. And in terms of complexity at test time, it means that our prediction function, if we want to evaluate it on a new point x, f of x is the sum of the alpha I k of xix, we simply have to restrict the sum to the coefficients alpha I that are non-zero, which are the support vectors. And this is why we call that support vector machines. So it's important not only because it explains why we talk about support vector machines, it's also important because it can lead to fast algorithms. There are techniques that also try to automatically detect the points that are easy to classify, and they will just remove them automatically. There are both recent approaches and old approaches that are based on this principle. Okay. So a remark that I made very quickly is this formulation with parameter c instead of lambda, simply because we use a different parameterization, c equal to 1 over 2 and lambda. Why this is important? It's only important for historical reason and for practical point of view, because lots of SVM implementations require a parameter c, such that it's good to know what it means, this parameter c. If we take the dual of the SVM with the parameter c, which is the parameter of this box, it corresponds to using this primal optimization problem on the top, where instead of having lambda over 2 here on the left, we have simply a parameter c in front of the sum of hinge loss of the margin f of xi times yi. So this formulation is often called CSVM. It's completely equivalent to using lambda, except that on your computer, if you ask an SVM solver, it will ask you for C and not ask you for lambda. So if you want to provide lambda, you have to do the job yourself to know and which is to compute the correspondence between C and lambda. So that will conclude the part on the SVM. Maybe a last remark is that I mentioned the fact that you can use a different loss function, which is the squared hinge loss. It has a different behavior. It will not encourage necessarily the alpha I to be equal to 0, but it leads to a formulation which is called the 2SVM. And you can also, if you like, work and compute the dual of this problem. You will see that it will simply gives you this formulation, which is related to the CSVM, but it's just a different loss function such that it has a slightly different behavior. Okay, so that concludes the part on supervised learning. So maybe a short summary of what we did in this lecture. We started by introducing a few concepts of duality. So it was going a bit fast on duality because we just needed a recipe, which was how to build a dual problem from Lagrangian duality. Then we derived the dual of the SVM by applying this recipe. So it's a part which is a bit boring, but which leads to interesting principles. And at the end, we have seen that the dual of the SVM is something which is in fact relatively simple. It's a very simple quadratic function that you want to minimize or maximize depending on if you put a minus sign or not under box constraints. And what we have seen is that we can also do a bit of work in terms of interpretation about the effect of the optimization problem over alpha to see that easy points that gets a large margin gives coefficients alpha I that are exactly equal to 0. So if you look at the slides, there were a few parts that I skipped about complementary slackness. That's also a way to derive what I did by plotting this quadratic function and looking at the different cases. We could also do that if you are familiar with convex optimization, but if you are not, it's still better to spend a bit more time on this interpretation where the gradient of the dual was related simply to the margin, or more precisely to the residual f of xi minus yi. This is how we derive this relation between the fact that simple points, high margin, gives coefficients alpha I that are equal to 0. And that gives us the support vector machine, and which explained a bit why this was called that way. So that's it for supervised learning, and next time we'll start talking about unsupervised learning methods.